Welcome to the next installment of my video lecture series for Managerial Economics. And in this particular video, I'm just going to give an introductory kind of overview for the entire course. I thought it would be a good idea to give you a little bit of background about myself. My name is Professor Guy Pascal, and I've been at Rutgers since 1993. I've taught at both the Camden and the New Brunswick campuses. I graduated undergraduate from Rutgers Camden. I went to graduate school in New Brunswick. And at the present time, I run my own consulting company. I do statistical research, mostly in the field of healthcare with managed care companies, hospitals, etc. Also, I would like you to realize that my online classes are equivalent to my on-site classes. I mean that, and the amount of material covered is the same, the intensity of the work is the same, and the amount of work is the same. So I want you to be aware of this. I know many students feel that online classes are easier than on-site classes. I want you to be aware of ahead of time that my online class for managerial economics is the equivalent in terms of material intensity amount of work as it is for my online and on-site classes. So make sure you're aware of that. Also, I'd like to give you a little bit idea about my approach. I don't look at this as just simply being a course on managerial economics. I also look at this as a vehicle for students to develop skills that they need in the labor market. The reason I also take this approach is that between running my own consulting company and dealing with my clients, I hear many of the same complaints about recent college graduates. And so part of my approach is to make sure that you don't make the mistakes that other recent college graduates make. So this way you'll be able to distinguish yourself from the competitors in the labor market when you just graduate. All right, I'll talk a little bit about this with the forms, etc. But the two main things that I hear from my clients about recent college graduates is the fact that recent college graduates think that deadlines are meaningless, and that they also find that their writing skills are quite a bit lacking. So those are two things that I'm hopefully will be able to instill into you with this course: the importance of deadlines and the importance of writing clearly and concisely and be able to get your point across. But I'll address those on a few later of the slides. The syllabus, make sure you read the syllabus. This has the policies and procedures for the course. You're responsible for knowing what is on the syllabus. This is also something that is important relative to your when you get into the work environment. View the syllabus as the instructions your immediate supervisor is giving you for the next 15 weeks of the work that you have to do. Okay? Realize this, that if your immediate supervisor gave you a 4-page instruction sheet with what was due, when it was due, etc., and you were asking them questions that were already answered on this instruction sheet, that supervisor would take a very dim view of you as an employee. So I want you to be aware of that this lays out the policies and the procedures for the course. Make sure you know that. If you have a question, make sure you reference the syllabus to see if it's being answered. Okay? So that's one of the reasons why you should know the syllabus, because think of it as your instruction manual for the next 15 weeks. You have to know what is on the syllabus. Especially make sure you understand policies with respect to deadlines, if you're going to request an extension, and the late penalties that occur. That's very important. Realize that any student will be given a 1-day extension without penalty as long as the request is received prior to a deadline. Okay? I don't even care what you don't have to give me an excuse or a reason for it. You could all just have to say is, I'm requesting that I get a 1-day extension on the assignments for this week, or if you specifically want to address a assignment, if you've gotten 2 out of the 3 assignments done and you just need an extension for the 3rd assignment for the week, make sure you tell me that. But as long as it's received prior to the deadline, we will get a 1-day extension without penalty. If you are late, however, there are penalties associated with being late, and if you request the extension after the deadline, the penalties are listed out on the syllabus. So make sure you're aware of that. I hold very strictly to those late penalties. Like I said, if you request a day extension prior to the deadline, you don't even have to tell me why you want it. It's just granted automatically. Also realize that exceptions can be made for medically documented reasons. Okay? If you have a medical reason, if you tell me you are sick, you're going to have to provide documentation that you were sick. Notice from a doctor. Over the summer, I had a student who told me they could not complete the assignments because they were having surgery, and I requested the documentation from the surgery, and I never got any. Okay? So realize if you're going to use a medical excuse to get an extension past the 1 day allotted, you're going to have to provide the documentation for that. So make sure you remember that and realize that. The forums, make sure you put in the required amount of work, do some internet searches, etc., related to the topic, and spend some time writing your post out. I generally recommend that students not write the post directly into the forum, but they write a rough draft of their forum prior to posting. And a good habit of getting into is if you write something, let it sit for a little bit of time. All right? So, for example, if you write your forum post, let it sit for a few hours and then go back and read it very critically. That's another skill that I've been told by many of my clients is that not only do students their skills, writing skills, aren't very good, but their ability to self-criticize themselves in their writing or realize what they're doing is incorrect is lacking. So make sure that you avail yourself of that you make sure that you do some research, spend time writing your post before actually posting it on the forum, and actually critically evaluating and analyzing it, letting it sit. I find this to be a very good tool of letting something you're going to write sit, because while you're writing it, you get invested in it, and it seems like it might make sense. And if you go back an hour or two or a day later and reread the post, I find many times when I do that, I read something that I wrote and I have no idea what the heck I was trying to get across. So it's a good thing to do, that you can critically evaluate your own work. Also, realize that the forms themselves are going to be great holistically, meaning I'm going to look at the amount of time it looked like you put into it, how well it was written, could I understand it, is it vague, are you making comments that are completely contrary to things that we stated in class, and realize that I will give you the opportunity to fix those posts. I will comment and say, for example, this portion of your post is particularly vague. You might want to address this. I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at. If you write something that runs contrary, I'll point that out. So I'll have comments and concerns about your post, and then I will grade your post those comments and concerns about your particular post, and then you can address those comments and concerns to improve your grade. So there's a feedback loop associated with the forums, and I'm hoping that this will give some level of meaningful interaction with the forums. Just realize that you should give yourself enough time when posting these forums. All right? I will tell you right now, I strongly recommend against posting your forums on a Sunday night. Putting your post on the forum on a Sunday night, because then there will be not enough time for that feedback loop to occur. I generally recommend that you post your forum post the latest by Friday, your initial post. That way it'll give enough time for me to read, grade, post the comments, questions, and concerns, and then for you to address those comments and concerns to improve your forum scores. I take the forums very seriously, because technically this is the only way there's going to be any type of meaningful interaction in the course. So I do take a bit of time and I do read every single forum post and I read them very critically. So be aware of that. Also realize that there is a bit of variability in the workload. There are some weeks that the workload is higher than the average for the entire semester. I tried to balance the weeks out as best I could, but for continuity purposes with chapters and also having the forums, the minimum five forums that Rutgers recommends for online classes, I could not get all the weeks to be exactly equal to one another. So I wanted to point that out to you, and I also wanted to point out to you which weeks are generally going to be the highest. Week 1 I've identified as one that could be a higher intensity. This is mostly due to the fact that it's a 6-day week instead of a 7-day week. The semester starts on a Tuesday versus a Monday for every other week. So the main reason why week number 1 is identified is that there's one less week, and also because of the fact that there's a forum that week. So you've got like 3 homework assignments and a quiz, a forum, etc., reading the syllabus, all those different things. So I've made sure that you should be aware that this one's going to be a little more. Week 2 is quite difficult also, and week 6, 5 and 6 are of higher intensity. Week 6, especially from my previous experiences. These two right here, 5 and 6, are probably going to be the most intense weeks out of the semester. So I want you to be aware of that. Just also realize too that in knowing this, if you, for example, email me at the beginning of the semester and say, can you open up week 1's assignment early on that Monday and starting the semester a day early, I will allow you to do that. And that way, if you start this week number 1 early, you can get that week done and then request that week number 2 be opened early. So because of this, I will allow people flexibility that if you finish a week and want to have the next week's assignments made open to you, I will do that. But make sure you're aware of these weeks are going to be the highest, and also realize that you can see here the highest intensity weeks are at the beginning of the semester. So make sure you're aware of that also, that the most intensity you're going to get is in the first 6 to 7 weeks of this particular course. The syllabus contains these weeks. I also highlighted week 12. I didn't put it here on this slide, but week 12 might be, you might find a little more intense, but it was sort of iffy. So I included it on the syllabus, but not here in this particular video. So be aware of this and plan accordingly. And I already told you that there's some flexibility. If you notice this and say, you know what, I'd like to get a head start on week 5. So week 4, if you finish the test in week 4 early, you can email me and I'll open up the assignments for week 5 so you can get a head start on them. So make sure you're aware of that, plan accordingly, and use the fact that I will be flexible with the opening dates and times for these high intensity weeks to help accommodate students. All right. Just realize too that the homework questions that are assigned in my econ lab, they can be attempted 3 times each, and that quizzes and tests have 2 attempts allowed. So you can work a question 3 times in the homework assignments, quizzes and tests you can work twice each, and realize that the highest of the 2, if it's higher of your 2 quiz grades or the highest of your 2 test grades, is what's going to count towards your grade for the course. Also realize that there's functionality in my econ lab. Here I have a screen capture of a specific homework assignment. This is actually from my international economics class, but it looks similar. Make sure you remember this question help button. If you click on this, a drop-down menu similar to this. It might include some more information or some less depending on the question. But this question help drop-down menu, for example, in this question here, if you read this and said, I have no idea how to do this particular homework question, if you click help me solve this, it will physically walk you through the steps. It'll review concepts that you need to know to answer it, but it'll also work you through step by step what you need to do in order to answer the question appropriately. You can click on this and this will take you to the textbook, so it makes it easier for you to reread stuff that you need. The grapher here, for example, you might have to do a graphical analysis and you might want to do a dry run of the graph that you're going to submit for your answer using the grapher. And you can also ask my instructor. All right, so that will send me a copy of your question. And also make sure if you use this that you type in what you're having difficulty with. Many times I get an email from students saying, I don't know how to do this answer. Well, I need a little more information. If you're that completely lost, it's going to be very difficult for me. But if you've been able to work through some of it and say, I get stuck at this point, I can't figure it out. But in general, I can tell you right now, most students I've talked to tell me that this helped me solve this function is very, very useful because it goes by step, every step that you need to take to answer that question. Also realize that this function is available for quizzes and tests, but it's only available in review mode. So after you take the first quiz, you can go back and review it and then take a look at the questions you got wrong and use this question help button to help you figure out what you did wrong, how to work through the problem, etc. The same thing for a test. So realize that the question help is available while you're doing the homework, and the question help drop-down menu is only available for quizzes and tests in review mode. There is also a study plan that's incorporated in my econ lab for this course. I do not require students to work this. It's not a concrete part of your grade. The reason why I don't do that is that some students tell me it's incredibly helpful, and some other students said they didn't really need the study plan. So I don't like to force students into using something if it's not going to be beneficial to them. I will tell you that if you are struggling, that the study plan is a good vehicle for improving your knowledge and improving your performance. The reason being is the study plan gets updated information about questions you got incorrect on the homeworks, quizzes, and the tests. So whenever you get something wrong, it logs that, and then when you go to work the study plan, it directs you to work on concepts and ideas that you need to answer the questions that you got wrong. So it's an individualized study plan based upon your weaknesses. So it's individualized to each student, and it targets those concepts you need in order to improve your knowledge. So make sure you're aware of that. As I said, you're not required to use it, but the students I've talked to, if you're doing well, the study plan is not going to be that helpful. Okay, if you're struggling, the study plan, from what I've heard from students and gotten feedback, is it does direct them to things that they are having difficulty with and helps them improve upon their shortcomings in the knowledge that they have for the course. So make sure you're aware that it's available to you, and use that as if you think it's necessary. Also, make sure that when you're writing correspondence that you write in a professional manner. All right, if it's emails, make sure it's in a professional, you're writing in professional correspondence. It's a good idea. It's a good idea to get in the habit of this, that you adopt a more formal approach when you're writing emails, because then you don't upset somebody. All right, it might not matter to me or to other professors, but you might have a supervisor, and if you write an email that starts off, hey, that supervisor might be offended by the fact that you were so informal with them. Some people have a lot higher level of formality that they like. You're better off starting at a high level of formality, and if they reduce the level of formality, then you can reduce the level of formality. So that's the reason why I asked you to do that. Also, the same thing with your ask the professor, that drop down in the question help part with homeworks, quizzes, and tests. Just make sure that you're very specific about your issue with your email. Spend some time explaining what you're having problems with. If it's ask the professor, make sure you explain what you're not understanding. One time I got a student who said, I don't understand the standard trade model. Well, the standard trade model is an entire chapter in a book. So it's going to be very difficult for me to explain the standard trade model in an email. All right. So if you have difficulty with something, be specific with what you're having difficulty with. Don't give me a blanket statement about some very large concept that you don't understand. Make sure that you go through it so I understand it through 1 and 2, but once I get to point 3, I'm having difficulty with it. So be specific about your issue. whenever you send me any type of correspondence. This is important too because in the business world, if you're emailing an immediate supervisor and you're not specific about your issue, you're going to be playing email tag back and forth. And at some point, that immediate supervisor is going to grow tired of that type of correspondence. So it's important for you to start being specific about the issue in your email correspondence with this course. Also, I created some videos. They are located in Sakai. They mostly deal with graphical concepts for the course. All right. And the reason why I did it this way is that my experience has been that when students look at a static diagram in a textbook, they are looking at what the analysis is at the end. And then they try to read some text explaining to them how they got to this endpoint, which some students have a difficulty visualizing. What I do is I go through step by step. I start with, here's where we started with at point A. This occurs. This is what changes. Now something else changes. Now this change reflects this in the graph. So you can actually see step by step the graph building towards the endpoint that you can see in the textbook. I think students see this. It deals with it chronologically so they can see each component and how it impacted the graph. So those videos are not required. If you're having difficulty with a particular concept, the videos are there. For this course, it's mostly to do with the Q&As that are in the textbook. I found that with those Q&As that they needed further elaboration. So there are some that are related directly to the Q&As. There are some that are directly to specific graphical kinds of concepts in the course. And also there are a couple of videos that have been loaded that deal with problems from the homework quizzes and tests that were problematic for students. So you will see those videos also. They are located in Sakai. Again, they're not required. If you don't need to look at the videos and you're doing well in the course without looking at the videos, that's perfectly fine. There's no reason for you to look at the videos. But if you have difficulty with a particular concept, a Q&A, etc., you can go to the video itself, those videos, because it elaborates in more detail than the actual text that's in your textbook. And also during the semester, I'm probably going to be adding some additional videos. Generally, what I end up doing is after each week is over, I do an analysis of the homeworks and the quiz and see, is there any particular type of question or kind of question that students found problematic, and then I develop a video around that concept. That way, for the students who struggled with those ideas in that particular chapter or chapters, they can go to a video to get an elaboration on it. So when it comes test time, that video is available for them to view, so they're more prepared for that question on the particular test. Also realize that the final exam is optional. You will be given a provisional grade on December 12th. This will appear in the postum section of Sakai for the course. And the way things work is if you're happy with your provisional grade, you don't have to take the optional final. Your provisional grade becomes your grade for the course. If you're unhappy with your grade and you wish to improve your grade, then you can take the optional final. Just realize that the optional final is incorporated into your test grades. All right? So just make sure you're aware of that gets incorporated into the percentage of the, I think it's 50% for this course. So that's 50%. So before that, for example, if you've taken when you take the 4 tests, they'll all be worth 12.5%. If you take the optional final, each of the tests and the optional final will be worth 10%. So for you to improve your grade, you're going to have to do better on the optional final exam than you did on the average of your 4 test grades. So make sure you're aware of that. And the other thing you should realize is that this is a risk-reward situation. Okay? If you bomb the optional final exam, it is possible for you to lower your grade relative to your provisional grade. All right, so it's risk reward. You can be rewarded by getting a higher grade for the course relative to your provisional grade, or you also run the risk that if you do terribly on the optional final, that you can actually lower your grade for the course relative to provisional grade. So make sure you're also aware of that. It's a risk reward situation. Also realize that if you start to take the optional final, you're taking it. There's no changing your mind after the first attempt. All right? So make sure that you prepare yourself for the optional final exam before you actually start taking it.